It's becoming pretty obvious that independent media, or the rise of the so-called citizen journalist, is disturbing the Irish government to the point whereby they're now refusing to speak with certain outlets. And I'm talking about GRIPT media in this case. So, for those of you who don't know, there was an interesting spat this week, or tail end of last week, where People Before Profit, TD, refused to take a question from GRIPT media. And they were jumped upon by a few other journalists that were there that were not GRIPT media. And this has developed, this has snowballed to the point whereby now the People Before Profit squad are playing the victim card and, of course, whipping out the insults handbook and reverting back to just about all they know, which is far-right propaganda, blah-de-blah-de-blah, change the record. So Paul Murphy has also weighed in on this one, and he's making it clear that GRIPT media have a right to say whatever they want to say, but they don't have to answer any questions from them because they don't view them as a legitimate journalistic outfit. Now, some of you may be aware of this group, some of you may not. They do some great work. A few of the journalists in particular are very, very well respected. I don't know the whole setup very well, but there's a couple of names keep popping up. Fatima McGurning and I think Ben Scallon in particular. They're very good at putting MPs on the spot. Well, they don't want to talk to them anymore. And they've been questioning how they even got into the Dáil in the first place to ask questions. Apparently it was in off the back of an invitation from Independent Ireland's Ken O'Flynn. He got them in, and they're not too happy about that. Of course, they're labelling him now in this. They're blaming him almost for the fact that they have suffered pain and distress as a result of these questions. So we're going to hear what Murphy has to say today. And before we do, it is worth emphasising the importance at this particular time, more than any other time, that independent media has to be supported, whoever it is. Could be just one person walking around with a camera, share their work, throw it out there in social media groups. The camera doesn't lie. And as long as it's not clipped in and out of context, it tells a story. A picture says 1,000 words. Imagine how much more a video says. It tells a lot. And the government do not want independent outlets to flourish. Some TDs now are taking it upon themselves to decide they won't even speak with them or acknowledge them. And of course the hate speech laws that they want to bring in and enforce, as well as Garda recently calling for so-called citizen journalists not to be able to video them during their job. Well, why not? Isn't the saying, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to hide? Surely that applies to An Garda Síochána as much as it does to you or I, people walking the streets, doing their business. So let's look at Paul here.
Pretty much every single week here.
And this is him standing in his little outfit. I think he has at least 7 of those jumpers, 7 of those shirts, and 7 of those pairs of jeans at least, because he wears the same damn thing every day. Now, so do I. It must be said I have a very simple wardrobe, but I try not to look like a geography teacher or someone that's dressed up as a geography teacher. Looks like a confused chap, does our Paul, but he reminds me of a geography teacher, you know, a slacker. But there he is. Who am I to cast aspersions on how another man dresses when I wear the same clothes? Not the exact same clothes. I have multiple black t-shirts and whatnot. But anyway, I digress. Let's hear what Paul has to say in his little cosplay geography teacher's outfit.
With journalists on a range of topics. We're very happy to go on programmes of outlets that have very, very different views than ours and to engage in robust debate. But we make a distinction for GRIPT.
We make a distinction for that one outlet. That's how it starts. It starts with one group or one little person, one little geography teacher deciding that he won't speak to one particular outfit. And then that sets a precedent so other people can weigh in and say, well, I'm not going to speak to him. If you're not speaking with them, I'm not going to speak with them. And while we're at it, let's not speak with this, and let's not speak with that, and let's not speak with the other. This is how it starts. This is important. This is important.
Is not, in our opinion, a legitimate media outlet. It is the propaganda arm of a right-wing extremism in this country.
In his opinion, it's not a legitimate media outlet. It is a right-wing arm of propaganda arm of right-wing extremism. What a load of guff. A load of guff. He's propaganda. He's Mr. Propaganda for left-wing extremism, for crying out loud. Dressed as a geography teacher to make him look less malignant. Doesn't work, Paul. When you open your mouth, gives the game away.
There's a huge amount of evidence for that, and we refuse to normalise or legitimise them by taking their questions. To be clear, GRIPT has every right to publish whatever they want to publish. They've published some abhorrent things in the last number of days, but they have the right to do it. They're supporting sex for rent. They're supporting the genocide in Gaza.
Are they supporting sex for rent, where a landlord takes, let's just say, physical services in exchange for money? Are they supporting that? Are they supporting genocide? Are they calling for it? I don't know. I don't read a lot of this stuff, to be quite frank with you. I'm trying to stay on what's happening in Ireland. Maybe Murphy should do the same. Keep his nose out of other countries' affairs and worry about his own, the mess that's happening in his own backyard or even in his own house, before he starts throwing rocks at other people. Fair point.
But we are not under any obligation to answer questions from any particular outlet or any particular question. And I give you just an example over the last week of the consequences of GRIPT's journalism and their attempt to, smear us as not wanting to engage or whatever. We've spent the last week dealing with a series of very serious, violent and vile threats. Ruth has had to speak to the Gardaí on 2 different occasions. You had
This is a tweet that they've brought up from Conor McGregor. Why? I don't know, because it's got nothing to do with GRIPT Media. The last I checked, Conor was not on the editorial staff. Ruth, you are an abhorrent witch. The power of Christ compels you. And then he refers to Paul as a sick, baldy, scrawny prick. Who do these people think they are? Wastes of the public funds. Again, that's Conor McGregor's opinion, which apparently he deleted. But what's that got to do with GRIPT? Nothing, I say.
horrific, misogynistic tweet by Conor McGregor, which he took down after a while, very personalised attack. And a man who was previously endorsed as a candidate by GRIPT turned up outside the house of what he thought was Ruth Coppinger. This is a man who is currently on trial for making serious violent threats and death threats against politicians, and who has been endorsed as a candidate by GRIPT, clearly intending to intimidate, making a video outside. GRIPT was founded by money from the Life Institute, effectively Youth Defence, as a conscious intervention into the media space to create a propaganda arm. GRIPT,
you don't need a backer, a big backer, to make it into the media space. Maybe to that level you do. You do, because I'm sure they have premises and they pay their staff and they've got overheads and all that sort of business. But there's an army of people out there, and they're equipped with cameras, and they can speak, and they can document what's happening. And like I said, this is not just about GRIPT Media and Murphy's dealings with GRIPT. This could set a precedent that other TDs could fall in behind and extend it to other outlets, and then it could filter and trickle down to the silencing and the stifling and the suffocation of the little guys like me and many other like me that are just trying to go about their business and document what's going on. So he's going on about GRIPT structure and how they were funded. How was Murphy funded? You know, he's funded ultimately by the taxpayer, but all these NGOs, how are they funded? 30-odd thousand of them, €6 billion a year. You know, I would say worrying about who's funding GRIPT media should be the least of his worries.
Donated €18,000 to a right-wing European political party. What other of your media outlets has made donations to political parties? We disagree with a lot of...
He's talking about €18,000 here as if it's a big deal in the grand scheme of things. In the grand scheme of things. What about 6 billion, Paul? What about 1 billion a year for asylum seeker I-pass accommodation costs? What about hundreds of millions over to UNRWA? What about that? 18 grand, he's getting his little pink knickers in a twist over that, and I'm sure he's wearing a pair under those slack jeans. Don't ask me why, but I have a feeling about that. I might be wrong. Allegedly.
The political leanings of your media outlets, but they don't donate to right-wing political parties. They're journalists. One of them was a candidate for a far-right political party, the Irish Freedom Party, in the general election in 2020. Another was part of the anti-choice movement and participated in a pro-choice repeal protest, pretending to be a protester for repeal, carrying up a provocative sign in order to mislead people and smear the anti-choice movement. These are...
There you go again. By the way, notice how he's singling out these two, Fatima and Ben. Again, I don't know them. I don't have any contact with them. I've never had any dealings with them. I just know their work from being out there and scouring the media daily. Every single day, day in and day out, their names keep popping up and favourable things are said about them by many, many people. So it's interesting that he should zone in on those two.
Not the actions of journalists, they're the actions of people who are part of a propaganda arm of the right. Again, to be clear, they have the right to publish what they want to publish, they have the right to ask questions, but we have the right to say, no, we will not legitimise this propaganda arm of right-wing violent extremism in this country.
You know, if he had the words far-right, extremism, propaganda, if he wasn't allowed to use those words in his day-to-day speeches or addresses, what would he have to say? He'd have to come up with some new insults and smears, wouldn't he? But anyway, that's the state of play at the minute. I believe this is important because I believe it will set a precedent, or they will try and set a precedent with it that could filter all the way down. All the way down. So, support independent media where you can. Keep sharing the content. It's easy and free to do. Cut and paste the link, dump it into a WhatsApp group, dump it into a Facebook group, throw it up onto your social media feed, whatever. Doesn't cost you anything to do that. And you get the word out there. So, do it while you still can, because if Murphy and co have their way, GRIPT would be shut down and completely deplatformed along with many, many others. And I'm sure, I would think, in my opinion, there's plans underway behind closed doors to at least look at the options for bringing that about. So for now, I'm Rick Munn. No risk, no reward media. Over and out.